Okay, I think we're just about ready to get started. So I'd like to start by saying hello, my name is John Kingsbury. I'm Head of Digital Economy at the Knowledge Transfer Network, and we're putting on today's event on behalf of Innovate UK and UKRI. I hope you're in the room for an Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund Challenge collaborative R&D briefing session. If you're not here for that, then you're in the wrong place. But I do hope you stay even if you are, because I think there's lots of interesting information that we'll be sharing with you today. I think the purpose of today is twofold. The first thing we'd like to be able to get through with you is we want everyone here in the room and also those people who are joining us online to get as much information as possible, as they need, as you need, to be able to consider applying for this collaborative R&D funding. That's the first thing. So we hope that by the end, certainly by lunchtime, that no one in the room or online has any unanswered questions. That's what we're here to do. I think the second purpose of today is to get you to network as furiously as possible. Quite often in these briefing sessions, we find that new partnerships, new consortia are formed because you've met someone here who you think, yes, I'd like to join a consortium or put a proposal together jointly with these guys. And I think that's a really important part of today. So please be as socially promiscuous as you can be in the break and at lunch, etc., etc. And we'll give you plenty of opportunities throughout the day to find out what other people are up to and what you're looking for in partnerships. So that's really important. I'll just go through the agenda very quickly before I introduce my colleagues. The guys on the panel here, we've got Stephen Browning, Barry Shaw and Julie Brown from Innovate UK. They'll be giving you presentations this morning about the scope of the competition, about how to apply, helping you through the application process. We've had feedback from successful competition winners that actually hearing this stuff is fantastically useful. All of the information that they'll be telling you today is online, but actually hearing from Innovate UK directly, being able to ask questions, and we have time for Q&A session later, people tell us they find it tremendously useful to get answers. But of that a bit more later. Very quickly on the agenda, in a moment I'll be handing over to my colleague Stephen Browning, who'll be talking about the background behind Next Generation Services Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, and he'll also be going into the competition scope. And then there'll be an opportunity to have questions session, and we'll be taking questions not just from the room, but also from people who are joining us on the webcast as well. I think depending on time, we might be able to get a 10-minute break in where you can go and get even more caffeinated than you have been. So those of us joining online, you can go and get a cup of tea or coffee for 10 minutes. And then after, Julie and Barry will be talking about the competition process and eligibility. For those of you who haven't been through that process before, I think it's absolutely crucial if you can stay until that section. I know that you'll find it useful because Julie and Barry will go through in details the application process. We'll then be able to have a Q&A about the application process and eligibility. So we'll answer all of your questions. And then from about 12:15 to 1:15, we'll be holding a network lunch. That's an opportunity for you guys to meet each other. We also have some of these sheets out there, and this is a way of us capturing what your organization is, what you're looking for in a potential partnership, and what you can offer in a potential partnership as well. And we capture these from all of the briefing events that we do around the UK. We'll be doing 5 in the next few weeks, and we send this to all of those organizations who have expressed an interest in partnership. After today as well, we'll also be sending you an e-form for this. So if you don't complete a form today, but you leave the event thinking, well, I'm really interested in a proposal here, but I need to find someone to partner with, after today, you'll be able to complete a form online, and we'll be sharing that with everyone from across the UK who's registered for a briefing event. And then after lunch, we'll be running a set of presentations from you. Many of you have said, well, I'm looking for partnerships. So this afternoon is an ability for you to get up on stage and do a bit of a pitch, what your organisation is, what you'd like to focus on in a proposal, what you can offer, and what skills or capabilities you're looking for. And again, if you're able to stay for that afternoon session, feedback from previous briefing events always say that they're fantastically useful, because you can make connections based on seeing, I think we've got at least 15 or 16 different organisations who are pitching this afternoon. So if you can stay for that, that would be great. If you haven't prepared a presentation but you'd like to, that's fine too, because there's enough time today to be able to come up to me or Anita on the desk and say, actually, I would quite like to talk about my organisation for a couple of minutes this afternoon. So do please come and find me or Anita or my colleague Astrid, who's at the back, and say, she's waving over there, and say that she'd like to pitch. So just a few logistics. There is Wi-Fi in the room, and the Wi-Fi details are on the pillars on the walls. If you can't see them for now, then you'll get a chance to be able to find them at break. We are encouraging you to take photos and to share on Twitter. We've got a hashtag, which is NextGen Services. I think these are on most of the slides, so that will be shown throughout the event. We are not expecting a fire alarm. There's no drill, and so if one does go off, we'll alert you to make an orderly exit, and the fire exits around there. I think the whole day is pretty informal, so if you do need to use the toilets and things, please do feel free to get up and go to the loo, and they're out to the left and around. Okay, so I think without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague Stephen Browning, who's Head of Digital and Director for the Next Generation Services Challenge. Stephen, thank you.
Thanks. So good morning, everyone. I just have to re-log back into my laptop here so I can see my notes. Excuse me for that. So, Next Generation Services. As John said, I'm Stephen Browning. I am, for my sins, looking after this particular Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. And in this session, what I want to do is give you a bit of background on why we're doing this particular challenge, what an Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund is about, in a little bit more detail on what the scope and actual elements of the program are, so that you can consider how you might apply to it. Details on how to actually apply, as John said, Julie and Barry will cover, including questions like eligibility, how much money you can actually claim in your project, etc. So I'll leave those difficult questions for my colleagues, and I'll try and answer what are hopefully the more easy questions on what we're looking for. So just briefly, the Industrial Strategy funds. I don't want to go into the industrial strategy in a great deal of detail. There's just a couple of particular areas I want to pick out. One is that within the government's industrial strategy, there are 4 grand challenges highlighted. You can see them listed off across the bottom there. And the main one that we're dealing with here today is AI and the data economy. So it's basically recognizing that the increasing use of data and the sort of emergence of AI technologies is likely to disrupt pretty much every sector of society and every sector of industry. And we want the UK to have a leading position in that. So a grand challenge where, as government, the public sector, industry and academia, we can all get together behind a mission to try and drive economic growth for the UK. The Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund then is a particular element of the industrial strategy, which is trying to help increase the UK's R&D investment to 2.4% of GDP. So it's part of that push to achieve that. And what it's trying to do is then break down those grand challenges into more specific challenges that particular sectors of industry have, that if they are addressed, can significantly improve the competitiveness, the productivity of that particular industrial sector, looking, as I say, at productivity, but also bringing new skilled jobs. So it's a fund to help support that type of activity. What it's not is meant to be a generic R&D activity, as some of the other Innovate UK support functions might be seen. So what we're really wanting to do is make sure that we help industry address specific needs that they have. Right now, we're in the middle of a sort of 3-month period where a wave of these Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund programs are being launched. There are the 8 that are happening at the moment. I'm only going to concentrate on next generation services, but just to make sure you're aware, there are other Industrial Strategy Challenge Funds that are an opportunity potentially for you to apply and to help deliver that particular challenge. I'm not going to cover those in any more detail, but if you look up the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, then you will find more details of all these programs. And I said I wasn't going to cover it in more detail, but I have one more slide that just shows that each of those particular challenges fits one of the original grand challenges that I showed at the beginning. So for this particular activity, the next generation services, it is part of the Artificial Intelligence and Data Economy Grand Challenge. So everything we are looking at is how AI and the use of data will transform the services sectors more generally, and specifically this morning we're talking about accountancy, insurance and legal services. So I will probably say this several times, a few slides. Part of the scope of this competition is that anything you are doing needs to involve either AI in a fairly general term or the significant use of data. So then specifically onto next generation services. What we have here is a £20 million programme from government where we're expecting to support the development of the services economy more generally, and as I say, specifically accountancy, insurance and legal services at the moment, to deal with that potential disruption that comes from the use of AI and broader aspects around the use of data. So a little bit of context. As we all know, data is being gathered more and more significantly. There's larger volumes of data available, and that use of data is having significant impacts on a number of sectors and brings with it additional challenges that are non-technical. So ethical challenges, challenges around acceptability from consumers or from clients. So that big use of data is happening. AI is becoming more and more prevalent and potentially can disrupt every sector of society and every sector of industry. Within the particular services that we are looking at, so legal, insurance and accountancy, the UK enjoys a very strong position today. But when you consider the use of data and the emergence of AI technologies, there is clearly an opportunity for new entrants to come in, and those new entrants can be from overseas in the UK. We know, for example, that Singapore is positioning itself to be the legal tech center in the world. New York is also very strong in that area. China, with all the development around AI and the numbers of people they have, are likely to develop significantly in these areas. So there are threats out there to these sectors, that we want to try and mitigate. The other factor is these sectors are not at least perceived as R&D investors. If you look at ONS data, then the level of investment from these services sectors for R&D is very low. And for us, that's a significant statistic in that we see that the large majority of productivity growth comes from high R&D investing companies. So one of the things we want to do is try and help these sectors invest more in R&D so that they can do their own transformation. Now, I say perceived here deliberately because I'm sure there are cases where there's a lot of R&D investment going in from firms in some of these sectors that doesn't appear in the data because it gets classified in a different way. So we want to unearth that and support the growth of that R&D activity. Then the final point is that the UK actually enjoys quite a strong position in the emerging AI sector. So I've got third, possibly second on here. It depends who you look at in terms of research. My belief is third is probably realistic because China and the US have such an advantage around data and numbers of people, but we're definitely up there and we're leading in Europe. So with that, what we want to do is help these sectors develop the next generation of knowledge-based built very much on AI and data so that we can keep the opportunity that those sectors represent in the UK. Now, these sectors are significant parts of the economy. So I think if you take the three sectors as a whole, it's approaching 10% of the economy. Bit difficult to get precise numbers on numbers of people, but it's significant numbers. So we want to ensure that that remains a strength of the UK. And some lower level objectives behind there, you'll probably recognize as I've been talking that where these come from. So we want to maintain the leadership position of the UK in these sectors. We want to increase R&D capability and capacity because of that point around productivity growth coming substantively from R&D investing companies. And we want to support the emerging AI and data analytics sector. So then coming more specifically to the program itself. We're looking at the moment at three main parts of the program. We're reserving a portion of the money for future stuff that we're still developing. But three main parts. The first is a research program, which is already underway. It's not going to be a significant part of this briefing activity. That competition is open. I'll mention it a bit more in a couple of slides, but there's a research program aimed primarily at applied research within academia and the broader research base, together with involvement from industry. So it's important that we have genuine value to industry of the research that's being undertaken. Then the main points of the discussion here today are the two R&D activities. So the orange segment on this slide. The split between them is a little bit movable. We're reserving the right to flex that slightly depending on what comes in. But we're looking at a R&D investment of between 8 and 10 million for what we're describing as large consortia projects. So they're large projects that require a consortia of organizations to develop that. Those ones can be led by academia or business. And then £2 to £4 million for smaller R&D projects. So these can be single company SME projects or small consortia. Those ones have to be led by industry. So what we're trying to do with these three elements of the program is make sure that there's an integration between them, that they support each other. So we're looking at the research program as it develops to be taking learning from the two R&D elements. So there will be a requirement to share if you are successful in a project, to have involvement from people looking at what you're doing and researching on that, as well as trying to get learning coming out of the research program going back into those R&D developments. For each of these a little bit more fully. So the research program, as I said, applied research is what we're looking for. It's not meant to be blue sky thinking type research. An expectation that it is multidisciplinary. One of the key aspects that we're looking at across the whole program is that this isn't just about technical solutions, right? Typically, the problems that people have getting the adoption of any technology are the human ones. And that's very much the case when you start dealing with AI. So there's the ethics problems, the points around transparency, the points around bias in data. So we want to ensure that there's involvement both from social sciences, humanities, as well as the more likely computer science and mathematics types areas. And the particular areas that we're looking at for this research to be undertaken in is impacts of AI and how those impacts will either aid or hinder adoption, and how businesses can actually address those adoption challenges. So it could be in business models, it could be in consumer acceptance, it could be around bias, ethics, those areas that I listed earlier. A couple of areas that we think offer opportunities in there are, one, addressing the human type things when you start dealing with contracts or insurance, of concepts like reasonableness. How do you deal with reasonableness when you've got a machine involved in maybe suggesting decisions or actually taking decisions? How do you deal with the explainability, or the black box problem as it's known, of machine learning, to make sure that it's clear why a particular choice has been made? How do you deal with concepts like justice when you have machines involved? So that's one strand that we're expecting to be explored in there. And the other strand is always, when you start talking to people about applying particularly deep learning or machine learning type techniques, but other AI techniques, then the access to data comes up as a problem, right? So we want to ways within these sectors of getting the access to the data, or perhaps ways of coming up with inferences from smaller data sets, so that the access problem is less of an issue. So that's the research program. Then looking at the small R&D projects. So we're looking at projects here of up to £400,000 total project cost. That's total project cost, I emphasize there. That's not the level of money that would come from government. That depends very much on the sizes of organizations involved, the stage of development of that activity, and Julie and Barry will come on to percentages that you can claim back. So total project cost, probably maybe 10 of those projects that we'd fund across this. Needs to be industry-led. Could be a single SME working on their own, or it could be a small consortia. And what we're expecting from these projects is that they are projects that will deliver a specific need of that business or that group of businesses, potentially developing a new product offering or new service offering, maybe implementing AI and data techniques in part of their service flow. And it might be that these are quite close to implementation, so potentially doing the last stages of development before you commercialize a solution. As I said earlier, everything in this chapter dealing with AI and data. So it is a requirement that AI and data is a significant part of the development activity, and it has to be addressing at least one of these three sectors of accountancy, insurance, and legal services. Then the large R&D project. Here we're expecting total project costs maybe between 2 and 4 million. Again, the amount that comes from governments will vary depending on the people involved, the sizes of those organizations, and the closeness to market of the activity. But these have to be collaborations. We're expecting collaborations both industry to industry, so think of tech suppliers and services firms on the demand side cooperating. We also think it's highly valuable to have research base in there as well, so industry to research base. And on top of that, we'd like you to consider all the stakeholders that you need to involve within that project to deliver what you're trying to deliver. So, for example, if a regulator is an important element of what you're trying to do, then please try and include the regulator, the relevant regulator. What we're wanting these projects to do is to develop or to look at the transformational needs of one of these sectors, at least one of these sectors, and try and develop a collaborative approach across multiple parties in that will deliver a sector-wide opportunity. It's a sector-wide need. Now, I need to look at my notes down here just to remind myself of some potential areas. Actually, that comes in a later slide, so I'll come back to that. These could be delivering demonstration projects that demonstrate to the broad industry an approach. Could be pulling together consortia around, say, something like dealing with fraud or risk mitigation, bringing different data sets together that help identify, say, in the insurance sector, some new signals, some new ways of managing or pricing risk. As I'm going to keep saying, has to cover at least one of the three sectors. For these projects, I would be really quite interested in projects that cover more than one of the three sectors. So it's my strong belief that there are opportunities between these sectors for learning. So, for example, if you go back 20 odd years in the consumer insurance area, if you were looking for some insurance, you'd probably go to a high street broker to try and find the best opportunity. You can't find a high street broker anymore. However, services in the consumer area, it's still all high street legal firms. So maybe there's an opportunity of learning between those sectors, that type of thing. Also, if you think of the main business activity of all these sectors, it's significantly about managing risk. How do you manage, mitigate, price risk? So maybe there's opportunities there between them. They're also significantly about personal interaction, knowledge, experience, intuition. So having approaches that help use AI, machine learning, data to support that activity could also be an interaction between the sectors. And finally, we definitely are looking at this as not just the technical side of things, but also the human side of things. So going back to those adoption problems, the sort of explainability bias, etc. So we would encourage you to look at the research base for opportunities to include social sciences, humanities, as well as the technical aspects. So some quick timelines on these particular competitions or strand areas. The research program, as I said, is already open. Application dates for that ends on 18th of July. For the two R&D projects, they're both going to be open on the 18th of June, although information is already up on the site on what the particular application approach is, and deadline for applications, I probably should have put on here 12 noon on 15th of August. I'm sure Barry and Julie will emphasize that point. We have, as we always have from Treasury, a sort of use by date on the money that we get, right? So all projects funding activity has to be completed by the end of March 2021 on these. That means there's probably about 2.5, maybe 2.25 years limit on project durations, or at least claim from us. It might be that you can structure your project to then be self-sustaining afterwards in some way. But certainly the money coming from us needs to be utilized by the end of March 2021. So I'm trying to target a sort of December start date on the projects, and please bear that in mind when you're putting your proposals together. So then looking a bit at more specifically at the scope, there's essentially two scope criteria of it's in or out. One is the industry application area. So as I've said probably 4 times now, has to be dealing with accountancy, insurance, or legal services. And what I'm looking at there is not, I wouldn't expect, for example, someone to come with a proposal that I want to implement in AI an HR system that can be used anywhere, but I just happen to be using it in a legal firm, right? I'm looking at the specific functions of those activities and saying we need to transform those. This shouldn't just be a how can we support AI more generally. And then the technology area, as I've said again, probably 5 times now, AI and data. But we're looking at development of AI and data. You shouldn't be looking at just the adoption of off-the-shelf solutions. Now, there may be techniques that are used in other sectors. That's worth looking at if it hasn't been applied in these sectors. But this isn't just, I'm going to procure this solution from tech supplier X and implement it in my organization. And as I say, we strongly encourage you to think of the more human aspects as well as the computer science and maths aspects. So what do I mean by accountancy, insurance, and legal services? So I guess starting from the second bullet, I'm not just saying it has to be an accountancy firm, it has to be an insurance firm, or it has to be a legal services firm. A new entrant delivering a legal services function is in scope, right? The point is it needs to be dealing with what does an insurance company deliver or insurance function deliver to its clients, its users, or a legal services client. Sort of the converse of that, I'm not looking at an accountancy firm. The AI is reducing the need for humans, so I want to apply humans to a completely unrelated area like, say, writing books or something like that. It's not about trying to find other opportunities for firms in these sectors. It's about actually dealing with the sector deliverable. And as with all of this, if you're in doubt with your project idea as to whether it's applicable or not, come and ask us. You'll probably come to me and I'll be able to have a discussion with you on whether I think that's in scope or not. I can definitely talk about in scope or not. I'm not going to tell you that's a great idea or no, that's a terrible idea and give you an idea of whether it'll score well or not, but I will be able to tell you, yes, that will be in scope or not. What do I mean by AI and data? Let's start with the data aspect first. So this needs to use significant data science, significant analytical requirements. Large volumes of data typically would be involved. I have, in previous competitions, seen people come saying their project is a data solution when actually what they're doing is a paper-based survey and they're going to analyze the results of the paper-based survey. That type of thing doesn't fit for me in this area. It needs to really be involving R&D around the use of data. And then AI, I use the term quite loosely. I'm sure a large proportion of the suggestions coming forward will be around machine learning, deep learning, but knowledge-based systems type things fit in there, broad autonomy, that sort of thing. There's probably some of you out there thinking, what about things like distributed ledger or blockchain or the use of Internet of Things? For me, those are probably peripheral on this particular activity. They're a way of gathering the data, they're a way of managing the data, but I don't want to be considering projects that are simply applying something like distributed ledger to an existing approach without having some sort of intelligence on the use of that data. Right? So not totally out of scope, but I'm not expecting that to be central to or the majority of any particular application. Some general attributes that would be helpful. Any proposal? One, we very much want to support the responsible use of AI and data. So think about the ethics implications of what you're trying to do. Think about how there might be bias in your data sets and how you might overcome that. Think about the whole transparency aspect of being transparent to your clients, but also how do you explain decisions or suggestions that come from the machine, privacy elements, all those things would be very good to have in an application and would be looking for that. There's also a sort of, there's a question of augmentation versus replacement of humans, right? I'm not saying you have to look at the augmentation, but it would be helpful to look at a difference between automation and artificial intelligence. If you look up intelligent automation, you'll find some interesting articles about the differences. One particular thing that I would like to mention around this is if you look at Gary Kasparov's experience after he was beaten by Big Blue in chess, he went on to run his own competition, looking at AI together with humans, humans on their own, and AI on its own, and came very clearly to the conclusion that AI and humans working together, one looking at, say, the questions that should be asked, human type attribute, and the other offering solutions or specific analysis of opportunities, that worked better than any of the other systems. So that could be an opportunity within your own developments to think about that aspect. Starting to sound like a broken record now, consider the broader adoption issues as well as the technology issues. And think about user experience, user design within your proposal. And very, it's a final point on this, but I do want to emphasize it. This should be looking at how you're going to actually get delivery adoption of whatever you're proposing. How is it going to hit the market and actually change something? This is about innovation, which requires that, not just about invention and coming up with bright ideas. So then a couple of specifics again around the two types of projects. Just to repeat, consortia needs to address a broad sector-wide issue, needs to be significant transformational impact on that sector. And we're looking for coordination across the supply chain, including all the relevant stakeholders. the example I give is regulators, but there might be other relevant stakeholders you might consider. So, for example, in legal services, there are charities that you might consider. You might be addressing, say, the access to justice opportunity that bringing the pricing of particular legal services down offers. That might be an approach you want to take. And just repeating, I would encourage people to think more than one sector in these particular ones. I guess there's a point I missed on an earlier slide. I said we're looking at 3 large consortia projects. I'm not necessarily expecting it to be one from each of these sectors, right? So that plays a bit to this point as well. Smaller projects, as I say, application of AI and data into what could be a service or product delivery you have in mind. Again, think about how you're going to bring that to market. What are the broader implications around that? And it must be about R&D. It's not just I'm going to procure a solution from someone else and apply it into my system. And that's as far as I'm going to take it right now. So open to questions.
Thank you. Stephen, you're going to stay up there for questions? Yeah, sure. Great. Okay. So we'll be taking I see a number of you got questions. If I could ask you, please, a microphone will come to you, and because we're webcasting this, it's really good for other people. I think we got 50 or 60 people on the webcast who are also really keen to hear your question, but also the answers to the question. So please wait for the mic. If you could say who you are, please, and what organisation you're from. And your questions may fall into, am I eligible? Please keep those questions for Julie and Barry later. This question and answer session is really about scope. If I could ask you to be disciplined about your questions there. And finally, if you can make sure that there's a question mark at the end of your question, because actually lots of you are experts in the field and we'll want to have comments, but really if I can keep you to questions about the competition, that would be great. The question that I'm going to preempt, which is what we also always have as one of the first couple of questions, is will we be making the slides available? Yes, we will. And I should have said that at the beginning, so apologies I didn't say that. And not only the slides, but the web stream will be available. So anything I've droned on about, you'll be able to hear again. So I think, your first question is over there. Thank you.
So Tim McGar from BSI, so British Standards. It's a quick question about, you mentioned about regulators. And I can see how this can be key for a lot of the competitions. So just in terms of thinking about the fact that they're going to be approached a lot over the summer, have you already spoken to the regulators and do you have contacts that people can engage with? So
I think we have some of the regulators registered in the room. If there's anyone, we certainly had registered. If there's anyone here that wants to volunteer their hand to say, I am one, please do. Yes is the simple answer. We have had discussions with various of the regulators. I can't say we've discussed with all the regulators because I'm aware that, for example, in legal services, there are 9 different regulators just in England, right? And then you've got the devolved administrations, etc. But we have some key contacts that we can put you in touch with.
And Stephen, presumably that counts as true for trade associations as well, so there might not just be regulators, but as counts as true.
Charities, trade associations, regulators, yourself, Tim, if there's a need to look at a standard, then I'm sure you'd be more than happy for us to point people in your direction. So.
Thank you. There's another question down the front there.
Takashi Matsuda, FCT Inc. My question is about more about the assessment of the proposal. Lots of the focus is on the AI or machine learning, but I guess the AI is dependent on the flowchart or the algorithm or the science behind it. how are you going to assess the proposals, the eligibility proposals, the functions, or a possibility, or a good proposal, or human factor, or coding engineers possibilities?
So I think that question's about assessment, which Julie and Barry, you talk about the assessment process a bit later. So we'll come on to that in a second. There's a question at the back there, Anita. Thank you. No, wait for the mic, please. Thank you. Because there are people on the webcast, you see. So
my name is John Cummins. I'm from Innovation Partners. The question is, financial services beyond accountancy, is that within scope or not?
No, is the simple answer. At least not at this stage. So one of the sort of behind the scenes type intentions of this program is to prove that we can deliver value to the services sectors more broadly. And if we prove that, then we will be looking to expand it potentially into financial services more generally.
The reason I asked the question is partly because you mentioned the possibility of cross-sectoral learning. And of course, there are sectors there that are within scope that have the capacity to learn from other sectors in specific areas. Hence my question.
So if a proposal comes forward to say, we are going to be addressing a need in, say, insurance or accountancy, and we want to involve a partner that happens to come from another sector, whatever sector that might be, to bring some learning from that sector into here, because they're addressing a need in insurance, accountancy, or legal services, that would put it in scope.
Okay.
But developing something purely for the use of the other alternative sector, that's not in scope. So it has to have an applicability to one of these three sectors.
So a knowledge transfer element within the context of industry. So if you are
John, I think Stephen's answer is the application of the R&D needs to be in those three sectors. Companies in a consortia can come from anywhere. Yeah. There was another question. Anita.
Roger Burke-Hamilton here, DigiFreds. Just interested in your discussion around human experience and whether or not in the bids you were expecting to see a cohort of people who would actually be able to cross-check whether the application that's been built or being perceived to be built is actually worth its while. And second on that is, when you look at it from a human experience point of view, you could argue that actually, why do you need some of the intermediaries or the brokers for insurance? Because it is about, as you say, it's about risk and trust. So if people design things which are about the human experience, then you could see actually there was a bit more disruptiveness going on in those sectors.
And I didn't understand what the question was there. Sorry.
Two questions. One was about whether or not human experience had to be evidenced based right on the bid. And secondly, whether or not actually you could look at this upside down. If you're looking at it from a customer point of view, you actually are disrupting the whole sectors.
Right. So taking the second first, if you are coming with a solution that transforms the sector such that some of the intermediaries are no longer within that, then that would be within scope, right? On the first one, I'm still not quite sure I understood the question, but what I'm trying to emphasize is that we want people to consider more than just the technical side of things. It's from all my discussions over the last number of months, I keep hearing the main things that are going to hold back the adoption are the human side of things. The technical side of things might be challenging, but probably solvable. The human side of things is where the problems are going to be. So I want the human side of things considered to make sure that the adoption has the best chance of happening possible, rather than let's put a technical solution and think about the human side afterwards.
Thank you, Stephen. There's a question down.
I've got the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So we'll take your question, madam. If you'd like to say who you are and where you're from, then
Thank you. Nankunda Katangaza from Hook Tangaza Legal Sector Consultancy. My question is just a practical one. Can an entity be involved in more than one bid within each group or across groups? Is there a limit to the number of bids or consortia?
yeah, we'll go through that in the second session.
Okay.
Under eligibility. Thank you. Sir, you're.
So David Poole, I'm a co-founder of a company called Mind Foundry. So we're a spin out from the University of Oxford from the Machine Learning Research Group. And just a quick question. So we've developed some background IP using models and algorithms and different machine learning and AI techniques. What happens to the foreground IP that gets folded into the consortium?
So the foreground IP, we would expect the consortia to determine how that IP is dealt with across the consortia. As government, we will not take a ownership of that IP at all. Part of the intention here is that industry partners find a way of having IP that they can then exploit and build economic growth ultimately. That's what we're about.
Thank you. There's another question down here, Anita. Anita. Thank you.
Where are you pointing?
Sorry, thank you very much. Can I stand up?
No?
So David Henry, Cognitive Plus. On the start of it said December 2018. What's the soonest R&D project can finish, or has it got to be a certain length of time, or what's the sort of time frame?
Yeah, we'll
Yes,
come
as
back. Okay. Suspense. There's a question at the back there, please.
Hi, I'm Tatiana Bersheda from LexSnap. It's a legal startup. I was wondering, because this involves insurance as well. So have you approached insurance companies with view of insuring AI as such? So I'm thinking about driverless cars insurance. Have you considered creating a new product to ensure whatever will be the result of this project in all three sectors?
So I'm going to answer that in a couple of different ways. One, we're not approaching people with our idea of what they should develop. Right? That limits all possibilities to my imagination, and that's not going to be anywhere near what the industry as a whole can come up with. Right? Having said that, I have spoken to some insurance companies, and that as a concept is one that has been raised, and if there's R&D investment in there and it's an opportunity, I could see that being in scope.
So it's something we could ask you to put us in touch with the insurance company, as you've already discussed the issue with, right?
I would have to see how we do that, check with them that they're willing to be put in touch with. But,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
After the 25th of May, I need to check.
Thank you. We will have time for more questions in the room, but I just wanted to take some questions from those people who are logging on. Astrid, would you like to just read out a couple of questions for Stephen, please?
Yes, I've got 3 questions. One is from Lisa Jack from the University of Portsmouth. Are we talking about accountancy in its widest sense, not just public practice, but management, accounting, internal audit, and tax, etc.?
Simply yes.
Great. And Adrian Percival from Flourish Zone has 2 questions. First one, is there an opportunity to do a project in between the small and large? Example, a project for £1 million.
So no, the strands we have running are for these 2 sizes of projects.
Great, and thank you. And the last question, can the project be aimed at improving the internal productivity of legal accountancy and insurance, or is it exclusively focused on the services to the to customers?
I'm not sure I entirely see a difference between the 2. If you improve the productivity of a firm, then you have the opportunity to change the service offering to the client. So I wouldn't see a particular distinction. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Stephen, but just to confirm, there's no, if a proposal came in that wasn't immediately customer facing, it's not out of scope for the competition.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank
That's
you.
for the small projects, that's correct. I would struggle to see how you could just have a completely internal to one firm, large consortia project that transforms the entire industry. Maybe that would happen, but I struggle to see it at the moment.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Astrid, are there any other questions that you'd like to raise? No? So,
No.
and Anita, there's a question from the gentleman over there. You've already got a mic. Fantastic.
So a related question. We've been doing I'm in service from the Behavioural Insights team. We've been doing quite a lot of work around the way that small businesses access advice in these markets. I just want to make sure that that is also in scope. So it's about the way that small businesses access legal or accountancy advice as opposed to processes within those firms.
So each of these services sectors have an offering to SMEs as well. And we know, you said yourself, that SMEs don't necessarily access the advice they need. I guess it's in scope to the extent that if a services firm is developing an offering that is more accessible to those clients, then that becomes in scope. I could see a client being involved in a consortium if there's a particular need for them to provide input into the project. Yes. Not sure that entirely answers your question. It's sort of, for me, it's rather like the access to justice point that I made earlier. You wouldn't go and assume that every consumer that needs legal services is in scope for this, but the legal service is being developed so that more consumers have access to that justice. That would be in scope. Does that answer it?
Okay. There's another question.
Can I just continue that bit? Because you mentioned legal brokers earlier. So marketplaces and essentially distribution channels that use data and AI to get access to insurance, accountancy, etc. They sound like they're in scope.
They are in scope, provided they are using AI and large data analytics. So a straight website just going, look, these are all the legal services in your area. You might say that's data. It's not really significant data analytics type activity, but a way of providing a platform that uses some sort of machine learning to find the right opportunity or to deliver the solution in a particular way that makes it accessible. Yes, that could be.
Okay. Last question there, Mike.
Mike Short, Department of International Trade. Can we just explore a little bit some of the international issues here? Because you did touch on countries that are strong in some areas. So can you comment on the importance or not of international collaboration? Maybe some products that might be export ready from these three, dare I say, international sectors?
Yep.
And also whether adjacent technologies such as blockchain would be, seen well as being within the AI data core as an adjacent combinational technology, if you like.
So on the latter one first, in combination with AI and data, then blockchain, I would see as a possibility. Having it as purely I'm applying blockchain, then I don't see that as central to this. And on the international point, then absolutely these are internationally competitive industries. So if, for example, a consortia thinks they need to involve an international partner, that's possible, but the international partner would not be able to be funded. They'd have to fund themselves. Equally, we're trying to make sure that the UK is competitive and has economic growth. These are large exporting industries, so we want to maintain, and if we can, improve that position for the UK. So yes, international is very important. And thanks for the prompt.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so we're going to take a very short break, please, until 11:15. Just gives you a chance to stretch your legs. There are teas and coffees and some water out there. We'll have you back. We'll let you know when it's 11:15. For those of you on the web, please come back at 11:15 where you'll have the really, really interesting bit, how to apply and what the eligibility process is. Thank you.
Okay. White chocolate. Yeah. We'll still work for you. That's our price.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the questions. What are people doing? Are they happy?
It's on mute.
I'm French. Yeah. It's worse when
We're
I'm French.
smorgasbord. In the States, we got SA for the French.
Are you from SA? I've spent a year in Cape Town. Loved it there. My husband now is studying a master's in Cape Town, and I decided to spend a year there.
Well, there's a little section of just south of LA that's about 15, 20 minutes before you hit Long Beach Road up to the south. Yeah. It's a lovely little spot. Everybody seems well, I can ask the same for my friends here. Why we all do it here, you know?
15, yeah.
My parents are great. I came back to find out one of the products and all my friends make comments about my
It's a nice side.
So, you know, it's on the West Coast, some people that have traveled to know geography about where people are in the world. And then you get the others, all they know is the beach.
It's not like one set of Americans.
There's
Maybe
not,
a bit more.
no, there's not that many. Yeah, there's very few.
But you can't blame them. America is a big country.
Yes,
And very
diverse.
yeah, diverse.
That's why a lot of people want to go in there and get lost. It's the same for people want to get in there and get lost. You know, you go into these larger countries. And then I found out all the brain, all the terms, which like all the brain, the brain, you want to go further, deeper into that go somewhere else in the world, where they can find the support for things that it's very innovative. But
yeah, no, but I think the well now it's changing a little bit, but business environment is not very good. Hiring people, and also hiring so when you build a startup, they're scared of hiring people.
yeah, they are going to be more trouble than they were.
Exactly. What they do is they don't hire anyone, and they just bring themselves.
Welcome to the EU.
Yeah.
But you know that I hope that comes to the States because there's some states that have what they call the right to work law. Utah's one of them. And basically the right to work is if you want to work, you work. If you're sick, and you can have a legitimate doctor's notes and everything, somebody's fired you on the spot in the next day. Just think the final check. That's it. See you later. Bye-bye. I've known black families. They were sick and legitimate excuses. And they have insurance, but the state doesn't believe in it.
To be honest, I think
It's the state, the laws of the state.
in the UK, you might get a notice period, but after a while,
Yeah, you have I guess if you write in the contract,
that's like a
three kind of strikes. But
you better with the insurance. That's like
yeah, but I know Utah, my sister told me it's a right to work kind of law. It works that if you're sick, you fall sick, the company they have the right to keep you or drop you next day if you don't show up. So basically, you're wondering if they like you or not. You know, so it's funny to say.
it's getting the right balance.
You don't know.
Liberalism.
Everybody's the world is all juggling what's going to happen for globalization.
Yes,
Sorry.
Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, because that thing is like.
Is it still showing up? Right here. Yeah. That's interesting. I think it's an adjustment on that thing somewhere there because you've got the self one. You can flip things around here. No, but how can you do those things? I was reading about it. I like to mess with it. Yeah. No, but see, you wouldn't do it on law. You do it on as a software. This becomes the software package actually on your desktop. You do it on your desktop. I was reading about it, but I decided to read it and have like I'm with you. It's working. It's right there. I walk away and say, it's working. Yeah. It's recording fine. There? Where is it? It kind of makes your head kind of go funny when you look at it. The end result is fine. Beautiful. Don't waste the energy on others. You do that later. Is her screen, is her display? But your font, yeah, the white. There's plugs all around the room.
Yeah, but I just need one.
No, I'm saying if you had that's your own charge, you could be doing it anywhere in the place on against the wall. No worries. No worries. Electricity's not metered yet.
I am waiting for the moment where technology will allow me to not need a phone, and I would just be able to take my calls on my thumb and my little finger going, hello?
It'll be in your eye.
That'd be terrible, wouldn't it?
It's on a contact lens, you already have the technology.
I know. If I only knew how to put contact lenses on, that'd be the bionic one.
Don't worry, you're going to get shipped anyways. We're all going to get shipped. It's fast. And then you design. And then you become a side load.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you could take your seats, please. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. That was a very, very quick break, and it's really heartening to see so many new conversations happening. I apologise for bringing you back and cutting those conversations short, but you will have lunch, so there'll be another opportunity for you to get to meet people. This is what I'm told to say is the most interesting bit, and I agree. from talking to people who are here today, there are lots of you who actually haven't applied for Innovate UK funding before. And in that case, and even if you just want a refresher, I think this next session is fantastically useful because Julie Brown and Barry Shaw from Innovate UK are going to run through the application process, eligibility, what Innovate UK will fund and what it can't fund. At the end, we'll have another Q&A session, and Stephen's going to stay with the panel so that if there are any residual questions about scope, then we make sure that we answer all of those. Again, all of this information is up online, so you don't have to take photos, and we're streaming the film of today's presentation as well, so that will be available straight after this briefing session. So if you miss anything, don't worry, you can find that information on the web. But Julie, please.
Thank you, John. Right, just logging in. Okay. Right, hi, I'm Julie from Innovate UK, and I'm with my colleague Barry, who will be up shortly just to talk around finances. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to do criteria, application process, which involves the IFS, that's the Innovation Funding Service, which is our new digital platform. We will go through the finances. Barry will go through the finances. We'll talk about funding rules. We'll look at assessment and the selection process. And then we'll talk about project setup for successful applicants. And then, like John said, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So if you do want to ask any questions or anything for Stephen on scope, please do then. Okay, eligibility. Stephen's already been round through all this, and again, just to reiterate what John has said, every single thing we're going to talk about is online. So my strong recommendation is to read the briefing documents that are online for each of these strands, so you get all that information in there. Just going through this, the small consortium strand, which is for feasibility, industrial research and experimental development. The project eligibility to be able to apply for this competition, you have to be a UK business, academic, charity, public sector organisation or an RTO. It must be led by business. The projects must contain an SME. You have to carry out your work in the UK and intend to exploit the results in the UK. Project cost for the small is under, if you want to do under 200k, and that's for a single SME, or if you want to collaborate. Between 200,000 and 400,000, it must be collaborative. So the projects must be collaborative and it must involve an SME. The project length for the small is between 1 to 2 years. Okay, for large, again, UK business, academia, charity, RTO, etc. But you must work in collaboration with one or more organisation. You must carry out your work in the UK and again intend to exploit the results in the UK. Here, the project costs are between 2 and 4 million, and these are for industrial research and experimental development only. Project length is up to 2.5 years. Each of these strands will have an application form with 10 marked questions. You are allowed appendices, and that's on questions 2, 3, 7 and 8. If you do have any academics in your consortia, you will require a JES output document, and it must have a with council status. Okay, these are just a slide with the types of organisations that can apply. So it's pretty much just explaining what I've just spoken about. So business, small, medium or large, research organisations, which includes the universities, non-profit distributing RTOs, catapults, public sector, research council institutes. And also down there, public sector organisations and charity doing research activity. Participation rules. For this competition, business, for the business side, it must be at least 70% of the total project costs. For academia, research organisations, I should say, is going to be 30% of the costs. If you do have 2 or more within your consortium, they have to share that 30%. Okay, collaboration. To have an effective collaborative project, there must be at least 2 organisations claiming grant. A business or RTO-led consortium must involve both the business and the research base, and we need to see examples of effective collaboration. We need to understand what the parties involved are going to contribute to and what they're going to get out of it, and that is very, very important, and we must see that in the application form. Okay, making one more application and resubmission. Someone asked this question earlier. Slightly different for the two strands. So again, please go online and read the guidance. It's all in there, the brief. So large consortia, any one organisation may lead on one application and can be a partner in any number of applications. But for the small, any one business, again, can lead an application and partner in a further 2 applications. And if a business isn't leading, they can be a collaborator in up to 3 applications only. An RTO or an academic, if they're not leading, can be a partner in any number of applications. Okay. If your application is unsuccessful, you can use the feedback that you received to reapply into a further competition. And in in all our competitions, really, a project proposal can only be submitted twice. I'd say just going over the key dates. The competition opens 18th of June. Briefing event is today, 5th of June. Submission deadline is noon, which is 12 o'clock, 15th of August. Interviews, which is for the large consortia only, is the week commencing the 15th of October. And if you are successful and are going to interviews, we would, at the notification stage, sort of let you know that you are going to interviews and let you know what you need to do and when by, etc. So we'll confirm that further along the line. Applicants applicants informed, I should say, is 5th of November. Okay, so the application process. So you go on to innovateuk.gov.uk and latest applications. You can go on and do word search. So if you're looking for the competition, just put word search in. It will bring up the competition. That will just have a brief summary of the competition. You click into there, and then you've got the various tabs, which is eligibility, scopes, how to apply, which will have all the guidance, and that will have all the questions. So if you do want to have a look at all the questions again, you just go in there. Once you're ready and you feel happy, that's the competition that you want to apply into, you just press start new application and you come through to here. Anyone who hasn't applied for a competition with us before will need to set up their own account in IFS. So it is as simple as just going in there and putting your company and your email address and you'll be set up. If you want to use Companies House to look for your address to make it a little bit easier, you can do. Once you've done that, you'll come through to this screen. So you'll be able to see the T's and C's, the progress bar of your application, be able to have a look at the brief, just to read it through again, any guidance notes, and you can add your team members here. So you can build your team members from this page. Okay, again, like we just said, inviting and working with collaborators. So with your consortium, it's as simple as just putting in their email address and IFS will invite them into your application. So everything is done through IFS. Okay, nice and easy. You can assign a question to your collaborators or your partners. This is a really, really good aspect of this program. No longer do you have to email each other and get documents lost. You can actually invite someone to answer a question, so it will send invite them into the question. They can put in their answer, they can send it back to you. It can go backwards and forwards between all the different members, so it's really key. We've got fantastic formatting of your answers now, so you can bold, you can put spacing in, you can italic, so that makes it much, much easier for the assessors to read. Spell check using your browser, there is a word count, so everything you need to answer that question, including the guidance, including the brief, is all there on one page. Okay, this is what the application form looks like. It's split into 3 sections. You've got project details, which aren't marked, but set the scene for the assessor. You've got application questions, which is the marked questions 1 to 10, which I'll go through, and then the finances. Okay, so just going through those now. Project details. This is where you just add in the title, timescales. Be very, very clear on your timescales. Please don't get these wrong. We quite often have applications where they put in the wrong amount and the wrong duration, which can hurt further down the line, especially when it's looking at spend profiles, etc. Make sure you put in the right research category, because dependent on the research category that you apply for will depend on how much funding that you're actually entitled to. So that's very, very key. Project summary. This is just a real short summary, just telling us what the objectives of the project are. and this really sets the scene for the assessors. So this is key. Public description, this is what we will publish if you are successful. So be very, very aware of confidentiality here. Scope, most important question of all, does your project fit the scope for this competition? So be very clear, clarity, really do need clear here. Explain why you feel that your project fits. So the assessors will read that. Okay, application questions. Okay, this is what the application form looks like. 10 questions, like I said, just get my notes quickly. Appendices for question 2, 3, 7 and 8. So I'll go through these. I'm not going to read them all word for word. Like I say, you can go on and look at all these. So when you go online, look at your competition, you go into the How to Apply tab. Down the bottom will be all these with all the guidance there that you'll need. So question 1 is all around need and challenge. So what is the drive and reason for doing this project? Is your project market pull or technology push? We want to see there is a genuine reason for your idea. Question 2, approach in innovation. So here, what are you doing in your project and how is it an improvement on what already exists? Explain how you propose to address the need, challenge or opportunity that you have identified. Here, you can upload an appendix, 1 megabyte and 2 A4 pages of graphics and diagrams to demonstrate your technology. Please don't include any embedded links in appendices because we advise our assessors not to look at them. Okay. Question 3 is all around team and resources. So here we're looking to see that you've got the right people in place, the right people that can deliver your project. So have they got the right skills? If you've got the right access to the facilities to be able to deliver this project in the time that you've said you're going to. So who's involved and why them. Make sure you highlight any gaps in the team that need to be filled. And again, you can upload another appendix. 4 pages here, A4 pages to describe the skills and experience of the main people who'll be working on the project. Question 4 is all around market awareness. So here we want you to let us know that you understand the market that you're going to be operating in. So you need to specify the markets, that you'll be targeting for the project and any other potential markets. Question 5 is all around outcomes and route to market. So here we're asking you to describe the impact your project is going to have on the business and the consortium. Describe your current position in the market and supply value chains outlined. Will you be extending or establishing your market position? Question 6 is wider impacts. Okay, so here we'd like you to describe the impact of your project outside the wider team. Okay, we want you to identify and where possible quantify the economic benefits from the project to those outside the project, such as customers, others in the supply chain, broader industry and the UK economy. So we're looking at productivity increases or import substitution. Think about any expected social, environmental or regional impacts, either positively or negatively. Question 7, project management. Assessors here are really looking to see that you've thought a well thought out plan, a well thought out project here. So you need to outline any work packages of the project, indicating the relevant research category and the lead partner assigned to each and what the total cost of each one is. Think about the methodology you'll be using. Make sure you outline your management reporting lines and identify any key dependencies. Again, you're allowed another appendix just to upload a project plan or a Gantt chart. Question 8 is all around risks. Assessors are looking to see that you've got a really well thought out plan. They are expecting to see risk. That is for innovation, that's what you have to have. So here we need to outline the main, no you don't, Julie, read it properly. So here you identify the key risks of the projects, including the technical, commercial, managerial and environmental risks, highlighting the most significant ones and explain how these risks can be mitigated. Again, another appendix is allowed for this question, 2 A4 pages for a risk register. Okay, question 9 is all around additionality. Okay, would this project go ahead without the public funding? What difference will the funding make? Explain why you can't fund this project from your own resources. Question 10 is costs and value for money. So would this project go ahead without public funding, and what difference is that going to make? Explain, I think I've just said this bit, haven't I? Explain why you can't, yeah, I did, didn't I? Sorry. Explain why you can't fund this from your own resource yourself. Okay, so that's the 10 questions. Right, I'm going to hand over to Barry, who's going to talk about this. Can we ask questions? At the end, if that's okay. Is that all right? Just at the end, so we get everything that Barry's going to say, because it's an awful lot of slides still left to do, and then we can do questions at the end. Okay? Thanks, Barry.
Walks up and destroys the stage to start with. Good start, isn't it? Good morning, or just about good morning still. I'll go through the application finances. So within the innovation funding service that you'll be using to apply, towards the bottom of the application form, you'll see the Your Finances section, and you'll be able to go down and click the hyperlinks. The first thing we look at here is for finances for businesses and research technology organizations, the non-academic version. And we look at your project costs. Each of the drop-down boxes here, or the arrows, will expose further information so you can complete. So if we look at labour costs, the labour cost guidance is included within the application. So if you can see where the arrow is towards the top of the screen and it says labour cost guidance, if you click on there, then all the information that we usually talk about and is provided on this screen will come down as well. So for the application, we're looking at staff working directly on the project, paid by PAYE, including national insurance, pensions, and non-discretionary costs. We look at the working days per year. So have a look at your company's practices, how many days people will work, the average after taking out holidays, bank holidays, and things like that. We're looking at the number of staff and the roles within the project. So how many people do you have? Do you have one project manager? If so, just put project manager. If you have a number of technicians, then put technicians, and then put times by how many that might be. The gross employee cost per employee, and the days to be spent at this by all the staff. So if you've got multiple staff, it is the days that they will all be added together, please. What are ineligible on there are dividends, bonuses, and non-productive time. So with overheads, there are a number of ways that you can take overheads from the project. You can have a look at 20% of the labour costs. You can take no overheads, or you can calculate your own overheads. Innovate UK, when we're looking at the overheads for your project, we're looking at additional costs and operational expenses that are incurred directly as a result of this project. So we're looking at things like additional costs for administration staff, your general IT, rent, and utilities. Indirect, so your administration overheads, please ensure they're additional and directly attributable to the delivery of the project. If you're successful and you're claiming, then you will be asked to confirm how you arrive at these costs. If you're looking at direct overheads, so office utilities, IT infrastructure, laptop provision that doesn't come under your capital usage policies, you can use that there. Again, everything must be attributable to your project, and we'd like you to provide detailed breakdowns together with a methodology, the basis of your apportionment. So that's if you're calculating your own overheads. There is an overhead spreadsheet that can be downloaded, and you will be able to open that and upload it back to this section. Materials. So you can claim the costs of materials that you're using on providing your project. So these are not materials that you don't already include in your overhead calculations. They're purchased from third parties, and they don't have a residual or resale value at the end of your project. If they do, then you can claim the costs minus this value. All the hyperlinks will take you to further information to explain this in more detail, and you'll be able to get further breakdowns from the arrow where it gives you the guidance. It is as easy as it says there. You type in the item, the quantity, and the cost per item. Capital equipment, so we're using capital equipment usage. So if you give us the description of the item, please. Is it a new item or is it something that you already have? If you have your own accounting practices, please confirm your depreciation periods in months. The net present value at the start of the project for any currently owned capital equipment, and otherwise it's the amount you bought it for, the residual value at the end of your project, and how much you're going to utilize it. So if it's currently shared with day-to-day services, then we wouldn't expect to see 100% usage. But if you have bought it especially for this project, then that could quite easily justified there. Subcontracting costs. We do appreciate that sometimes within your consortium, they don't have certain skills that are needed to complete your project. We're looking at you to be able to justify and quantify these subcontract costs, please. So provide us the name, the location and where the work will be taking place, the role of the subcontractor and what work they'll be doing, and the cost as well, please. Travel and subsistence costs. All travel and subsistence must be directly linked to the project. So please actually spell out what you're doing on each leg of your journey, what the actual item is. So is it hotel? Is it a travel by car, car rental, train, what it might be, the number of times you're having to do each trip, the cost for each trip, and the total cost, please. Other costs are, as they say, other costs that don't exactly fit within the items you've been given. So if we're looking for SMEs here, you can get patent filing costs up to £7,500 for new IP. If you have training costs, they may be within here. If you have to provide materials for training, then again, have a look at if you can put that in the other costs. And that will all be covered in the other cost guidance with that drop down. What you will see when you've completed every section is this page again. At the bottom of the page, there is a tick box. And by ticking that box, you're accepting the project costs for your organization are eligible as defined in the project costs. And you still need to make sure that you mark this section as complete. You can then save and return to the financing section, which will take you back. The second tab to complete is your organization. So within your organization, we're looking about what type of organization you are as a business, and we're looking at the EU definition. If you're unsure, then you can click there and a window will open to help you. If you select whether you're a micro, medium or large company, then you will be able to then go forward. That there helps to confirm what level of funding you're eligible for. What we also ask you to do is confirm your organizational size, the date of the last financial year, financial overview, and the number of full-time employees. This is so we have baseline statistics to check economic impact. We are aware that if you are a publicly listed company, then this is information you are not able to submit. In that case, please put ones in there. I'm not sure if it will allow us to put zeros in the minute, but please put a 1 in there just so that you will be able to complete the application. When we select the Your Funding tab, the bottom one of these, we go to the actual funding rules that we've been talking about here. So the funding rules, we're looking at the level of funding awarded depends upon the type of organization that you are and the type of research being undertaken in the project. So funding is calculated by project participant. The Innovation Funding Service advises the maximum grant percentage you can request based on your answers to the type and size of organization that we've just seen completed and the research category that you defined earlier on in the application details section. A nice big table, which always helps that you can get this as a PDF or freeze on it later. Basically, it tells you that if you're doing feasibility studies or industrial research as a business, micro or small companies can claim 70% of their own project costs, medium companies 60% of their own project costs, and large companies 50%. If you're looking at experimental development in the large section, you can claim 25%. If you're a medium company, it's 35%, and a micro or small at 45%. When we look at research organizations, a university claims 100%, which is the 80% of FEC cost. Other research organisations can claim 100% of their project costs, but they must be non-profit distributing. They must be disseminating their project results and explain in the application form how this will be done. If you're working with other public sector organisations or a charity, again, 100% of eligible costs, their eligible project costs are allowable to be claimed. Again, these organisations must be performing research activity, disseminate their project results and explain in the application form how this is to be done, but also must ensure that any eligible costs that they're putting in with their application don't include work or costs already funded from the public purse. So your funding, each organisation will have to put this through. The maximum level for funding, as we've just said, is at 70%. For business or academic organisations, you can apply for any funding percentage between 0 and the maximum allowed. So this is the box. You'll be able to overtype that if you wish for any reason to take lesser funding. Each organisation must accept the terms and conditions of the grant. The lead applicant won't be able to submit the application without everyone having accepted the terms and conditions. So there is a finances overview section, and it does confirm the funding rules for the competition. It will tell you where we have the marking there, the total project costs that are allowable. In this case, it's between £25,000 and £1 million. And at the bottom, it's confirming that this project is claiming £169,000. So it's within the total eligible project cost for the competition. If you have overseas partners or you have a partner who does not wish to claim a grant, then you still must invite them to join the collaboration. But within the funding section, the partner must select not requesting grant funding. We still ask the partner to complete the Your Project Costs section so we can see the value of their contribution. But any partner isn't then confirmed in the grant offer letter if your project is successful. So, on to academic partners. Academic partners, we still ask to complete the JES forms. Why is that? Well, a lot of the time it helps us co-fund with our research council partners within UK Research and Innovation, as we all are now together. It's also a familiar and easy way for universities and higher education institutes who are registered there to complete their funding and have it ratified internally and by the JES system. Within the Your Finances section for academics, there is just a section for your project costs. If you click that, we then get to a representation of how the JES form would look. We ask you to enter the TSB reference from the form and then enter the TSB contribution column figures from the JES output document, please. At the bottom of this, there is still a place to upload your JES form as a PDF with the with council status on there. It isn't just the financials we're asking for. We still do wish you to complete justification of resources and pathways to impact. If you need any help with the JES system, please contact the JES helpline on the details that we provide there. So, submitting your application form. It's great when you come to a presentation and you've read it once and then you suddenly realize this is the actual dummy application you set up a while ago and it's got your name on it. Not embarrassing at all. I'm not an egomaniac. I didn't tell them they had to do this. So this screen you see here, anyone can see it. So anyone within your consortium will see the headline figures. They will see the headline summaries. They will not be able to drill down and see your actual individual staff costs or the material costs or anything like that. They will see the summary of the headline figures. IFS, as it says here, checks that all organisations have marked their finances as complete and all research organisation participation is no greater than 30% of the total project costs. If we look in the example here, that the lead organisation, Empire Limited, is yet to confirm and mark their finances as complete. So this application wouldn't be able to be submitted at this moment in time. We always, and whether it was on the paper version or now on the online version of a form, ask you to review your application before it's submitted. Each section needs to be marked as complete before you will be able to submit. So if you have a look here, you can see that questions 4, 5 and the finance summary are yet to be marked as complete. You wouldn't be able to submit this application. And it does tell you that on there. So everything's marked as complete. On the bottom, you can click the submit application and it does ask you to check. So it's the final chance you get to make any changes here. So please make sure that you're claiming the right grant percentage, that everyone in everything you want to read and confirm in writing is in there. You've uploaded all your appendices and you've selected the right category of research and development. Because if you click, yes, I want to submit my application, that is the complete application that will be sent out for assessment. Okay. So this is a representation of the last few hours of the January sector competition, and this is the Emerging and Enabling Technologies section. So you can see that in the last 3 hours of the competition, over 200 applications were submitted. In the last hour, there was 109 applications. Okay, for 6 years, I've stood up here and said, please submit them early, don't wait, don't risk it. We've still got the, and everyone goes, oh, yeah, we don't submit it at the last minute. We've got proof now. Please submit it early. Don't, you're going to do a lot of work on these things. Don't wait for the horrible thing to happen that you've got no mobile phone coverage, so you can't tether your phone to your computer and you're somewhere that your internet's gone down and you're not close to a decent private internet. Get it done early, get it in. Be happy and safe and secure in the knowledge that you've submitted it and you're in there. When your application has been submitted, you'll have a dashboard and it'll confirm the information on like this. Confirms what happens next with your assessment process, confirms what will happen if you're successful and if your application is unsuccessful. The dashboard itself will look at like this. So if you've got multiple projects, you may see your projects in different statuses. So it may be in project setup if you've been successful, or it's just confirming that your application has been submitted. So, assessment. All applications are assessed by independent assessors drawn from industry and academia. What do they look for? Clear and concise answers, the right amount of information, not too much detail. If you are making claims, make sure you back them up, that you've quantified and justified everything. Make sure your assessors are engaged and interested. You will be able to get your assessor feedback from within the application form. So everything now is done within the Innovation Funding Service. You will not have to go to a secure site to download anything, and you'll be notified when it's all successful. As you heard earlier, interviews will be held for the large consortia strand. You can bring 5 people to the interview if you're invited. You've got 30 minutes to present a maximum of 20 PowerPoint slides with no videos or embedded links. And then there's a 15-minute Q&A session led by members of the panel. What we do ask is that you give us the presentations and the presenters' names up front, so that everyone has the same amount of time to complete their presentation, regardless if other people have their interviews on other days. So I know we talked a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've done some internal competitions recently for funding within Innovate UK to actually look at bringing more machine learning and helping ourselves. So we have assessors and we have the who are more familiar with that, and we have a lot more people in-house now to help us get assessors that are relevant to your competition type. I know this is different, but we're actually starting to get assessors with these skills on board now because it's becoming more and more of a growth area. So please rest assured we're getting the right people to assess. I'll just let Julie go through project setup as she's got more relevant and recent experience than I have on this.
Thanks, Barry. Okay, so let's hope you're all successful, as I'm sure you will be. So you'll be going through the next stage. Okay, IFS, like we said, So you'll have 7 steps to complete your project. As it says here, you've got 30 days to complete your project setup. That's 30 days to go through these 7 steps to complete your project. Your project must start within 90 days. So that's part of your T's and C's. So going through these steps, project details, this is where each of the consortium need to put in a contact and a finance contact. So we will do all the talking through IFS. So once our project set up, guys, start looking at your viability and your eligibility and such like. If they do have any questions, it will be pushed through IFS. So you just have to keep a lookout for any emails, then go on, look at the actions and then reply, and it will go through that way. We will send you we will allocate you a monitoring officer who will be working with you throughout the whole project. Bank details, like we said, our project finance will be looking at your bank details and doing your finance checks. So you need to make sure those contact details are in as soon as possible. Spend profile, this is where the project duration is really, really important, because we will produce a spend profile based on the duration of your project. So if you put in the wrong duration, that's going to affect your spend profile. And other documents, so which I'll go through those in a minute. Collaboration agreement. This is the one document which delays the start of projects. It's a long, time-consuming, and as soon as you are notified that you're successful, our recommendation would be to start this process of the collaboration agreement. Okay, grants and payments. You have to make or be aware that all grants are payable or claimable, I should say, quarterly in arrears. That you can only claim costs incurred and paid between the project start and the project end. They will be subject to an independent audit. They're only paid once quarterly. Reporting and necessary audits are complete. Projects over 6 months are monitored on a quarterly basis. This will be with your monitoring officer, including a visit from your monitoring officer. Anything outside of this will be discussed on a case-by-case basis. And the monitoring will be carried out against a detailed project plan and financial forecast. Gosh, that was quick. Very quick going through those slides. Any questions whatsoever after today, if we haven't covered the process, or after you've had the Q&A session and we still haven't answered any of your scope questions, or going through the writing of your application, there's something you're unsure or unclear about, please do go through to our customer support service. The email address is there, support@innovateuk.gov.uk. We will get back to you. So any question, it will just be pushed through to the correct team and they can come back to you. Knowledge transfer network, very, very important. The email address is there. And then anything else, if you want to look at anything else about Innovate UK or any other competitions come up, please do use that email address there. Thank you very much for listening. I'm just going to pop myself over there and then we'll do some questions, okay?
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Barry. So once again, please, we've got a microphone. So if you could just wait for the mic to come down. Anita, right at the very front, please, the first question. And if you'd like to state who you are and which organisation you're from, please.
Esther Brown, University of Oxford. In sections 4, 5 and 8, I was just wondering, for the consortia bid, how would we express a kind of market awareness without preferencing one partner as the beneficiary of the project?
Stephen, I think that's probably for...
I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
So in sections 4 and 5, you're looking at route to market and also market awareness. So where that's one company, that's really clear to be able to make a case like you would in a standard Innovate UK grant. Where that's a consortia with different industry partners and also academia partners looking to benefit from such a consortia, that's going to require a lot of explanation for each partner. We're not going to be able to get that into 2 to 4 pages.
So you need to try and concisely put what the primary routes to market, sorry, am I audible? You need to try and put what the primary routes to market are for whatever is happening within the project. It depends on the particular project. The 2 to 4 pages is appendix information,
yes,
isn't
you can
it?
put supporting information in the appendix. Depending on the question, remember, we're only allowed appendices for 2, 3, 7 and 8.
Okay.
So you were talking about 4.
So if you had a consortia, for example, that had multiple partners in it, say over 15 partners, they're all getting different things out of it. That's my question.
Yeah, so I think there's two parts you were referring to, Stephen. In terms of market awareness question, is that predominantly about the scale and size of the addressable market, not necessarily about the individual beneficiaries in the project?
Yeah, it's about so in the large consortia, I said we're looking at a wide impact opportunity. So what you'll need to be describing in there is what's that wide problem space that you're trying to address. And I expect in a consortia, that's a common aspect rather than partner X is wanting to address this and partner Y is wanting to address that. Otherwise, it's a little bit of a fragmented project.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that answer you? Yeah, great. Yeah. Okay. There's a question just behind you. Thank you.
Richard Chaplin, Managing Partners Forum. This is actually a point on the Labour page from the presentation that you made. Law and accountancy firms are mainly partnerships. Are we saying you don't want any partners to be involved in the costings? Because if you insist on PAYE, most of them are not PAYE payers. So you would have to allow them to include, they're not eligible as presented, and I would hate to think they weren't going to be involved.
So we have, because it's taxpayers' money, we have to make sure that the salaries that are being claimed are taxed, which is why it's PAYE. You can use organisations to pay you PAYE, and if you look through all the documentation, there are rates that you can claim at for that, but that is how we have to have everything auditable.
But they pay income tax, is the point,
so,
as individuals, because they are partners of the business, they're not employees. They are legally not employees, simple as that.
Yeah, you can claim 40 hours a week.
Okay, while these two are talking, I'm going to go on to another question and ask them to come back in a sec. Does anyone on that, are there any other questions? Well, no? Any questions over here on eligibility? Have you concurred? Yeah, go on then, off you go.
No, it is exactly as I said, it has to be PAYE deducted at source. So we have to go through a payroll. If you want to put it as a question through, it does have to come through a payroll as PAYE earnings. If you want to drop it in, we can get it all officially referred to the correct people for you, but that is all the information that I have.
Okay, so we need to change the system. That's fine. I'm on the government council, by the way, so have some influence.
Okay, are there any other questions in the room then before yes, madam.
Anna Brown from Durham University. Can you involve overseas academic collaborators? I assume they wouldn't be allowed any funding, but could you include them?
You could do so, but you'd have to say why you're using them above the resources that we have in this country.
Right.
And you are right, they wouldn't be eligible for grant funding directly.
Okay, thank you.
Barry, could you just confirm about subsidiaries, companies that have parent companies ex-UK but have subsidiaries in the UK?
So if you're registered with Companies House and they have subsidiaries and the work is being done in the UK by UK employees, then you can include people as such.
Great. Okay. Thank you. There's a question at the front here. Anita, thank you. So,
apologies if this wasn't made clear, but what in terms of the assessment, what are the evaluation criteria? How will the judges and the assessors judge one over another? Is there a scoring scheme on and so on?
Great question. Yeah.
So yeah, there is a scoring matrix that's put together for each competition, and so that again is available to the assessors through their version of the Innovation Funding Service. And
so is that available to us?
No, it isn't.
Is there a rationale behind that?
Because it is the same. It is a similar standard for every competition. So to be fair to every competition going forward, that if we gave it to you now and it was the same for a competition in the future, you would have a distinct advantage over other people applying for that competition.
So when applicants get their feedback, are they given a score or is it narrative feedback?
No.
Or
when applicants get feedback, there is a score for each question, and the narrative for that question from the assessors.
And what's that score out of?
It's a score out of 10 for each question.
Yeah, right. So if there are 10 questions, score out of 10. So at least there's just to be as transparent as we can, there's a score out of 100 that you would get feedback from.
Does that suggest that there are criteria that are underneath the questions that we don't have visibility of in terms of preference of one organisation, one type of organisation over another, and so on?
The perfect consortium is up to how you put it together. There isn't anything. It's based on the answers given, the skills and experience, for instance. It's all based on how well you have answered the questions that and the guidance you're given in the drop downs for each question. So the judging criteria are based around all the information given in those drop downs and the assistance we've given you.
Barry, just is there a winning score? Does it depend from competition to competition?
So it would depend from competition to competition.
Yeah.
There are competitions that we have people who've scored 80 plus who haven't been funded, but then in other competitions there are people who've scored 70, 71, 72 who have been funded.
Right.
So it all depends on the quality of each application and the amount of applications that come in.
Okay.
The other point on that is with this particular competition, we've also reserved the right to do a portfolio approach of trying to make sure there's a balance across the needs of or the objectives behind the competition. So looking at potentially making sure that there's accountancy, insurance and legal services all dealt with, all addressed. So it might be that we end up funding something in, say, legal services that scores slightly less than something in one of the other sectors to get that balance.
Okay, thank you.
Mamun Rashid from King's College London. So I have a technical question and one associated question. So data we use throughout the project, is there any policy how long we have to keep the data or whether this has to be publicly available? And also second question is, do we have any publication requirement on the project? If you are from an academic.
And can I just clarify your question around data? That's that's data around the actual applicational use of data, not data around corporate data around the project.
So, I mean, my question was more on the corporate side of the, I mean, if there is some IP, how do we share, and whether there is a regulation that we have to share it publicly because it's a project funded from government or something?
Yeah, so I think.
So the IP is between you and the consortium, and I'd expect to see that in a collaboration agreement, how you are sharing that. Innovate UK doesn't take any part of that. It's between you and your collaborative partners. Sorry, the second part, I missed the second part.
Yeah, can you,
my second question was on, is there any publication requirements? If you are leading from an academic institute, is there any requirement you have to publish some papers or your outcome has to be available publicly?
Yeah.
Or?
So there is a public description that if your project's successful, that's the information we would put for transparency data on Gateway to Research or government sites, and it may be something you may see in the press. If you're an academic institute or a research technology organization claiming 100%, you have to disseminate the findings of your part of your research, and you have to tell us within the application, within your JES form, how you're going to do that.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that was my question. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. There's a question over there.
Here.
Hello.
Hi, they come from the UK Innovation Center. We will aim to help the high-tech company from China to UK open their business. So I got two clients. I want to ask whether they're eligible. They open the company here and register on the company house. they had they had AI and the data works business in China, which is successful already. They just want to copy the same success case in UK. So they have a full-time employee as well. So I'm just wondering whether they're eligible.
So, sorry, can I ask, was this about a previous application or about an application?
A new one. Yeah.
A new application?
Yeah, the new one.
Yeah. Well,
so my first reaction is you need to be undertaking R&D in this. So simply copying something that's already been done in China and putting it here, that wouldn't be in scope for me, right? If the R&D is undertaken in the UK, then that's eligible.
Okay.
Partner from China involved, as was said before, they could be involved, but they can't claim grant if there's a particular need to have them involved. But the R&D, there has to be R&D involved, and it has to be in the UK.
Okay.
And just to build on that question, if there's an international partner not funded by Innovate UK, but funded by the Chinese government or another source, is that okay for the project? Are there any restrictions?
They can participate in the competition or in the project. It has to be clear why they need to be participating in the project, what the value they bring in. But yes, they have to find another source of funding.
And also confirm where the IP is going to be held.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful. There's a question over there, the front, right, sir.
Hello, Tom Mellom from University of Oxford. My question's about the sort of basis of this funding as a pioneer fund within ISCF. So we're very aware of the interest in transforming sectors and really making an impact on the whole sector-wide impact in the area. But I'm just wondering how that fits into this kind of application process where, you know, some of the benefits to the partners in the consortium is sort of foregrounded, right? And the impact on the wider sector, of course, there's an impact section, but a consortium that really went for transformational or the seeds of a transformational impact or something that would enable a much bigger project in the future to have transformation would be something we would be interested in, and we would want to make sure that the assessment criteria, you know, gave due weight to that aspect of it, and that there was a place, you know, as it were, to articulate that in the project. And or you know, first of all, is that the right thing to be looking for on our side, because we assume that that's what this is about, right? And if it is, how do we make sure that it's given due weight in the process?
Yeah.
So again, probably a number of aspects to that. One, the pioneer status of this program. So I didn't mention that up front. So for the rest of the room, within the Industrial Strategy Challenge funds, there are a couple of programs, one of which is this one, that have been given this special label of pioneer status, which is recognizing that as Innovate UK and to a degree the research councils, we aren't so familiar with those sectors that we're trying to address, and those sectors aren't so familiar with us. So it's a recognition that we're starting into that field with an expectation that if we can prove that there's value on both sides of doing what we're doing, we have the opportunity then to go back to Treasury and say, right, this is what we've learned. Now we'd like to get a larger program, right? So that's what the pioneer part means. So to your point, Tom, the projects within this funding need to be self-contained, right? So saying I'm going to develop something and the real value is going to be coming in a follow-on program that we don't know whether we'll have the funding for or not. It's good to have those ambitions, but the project itself has to show value on its own, benefit on its own. Parts of the pioneer bit does mean that then as a program as a whole, we'll be looking into each of those projects and what they can deliver further. So that interaction and that openness to push the broader agenda is certainly beneficial in there. But fundamentally, for the funding, it needs to be self-contained. I think that's the best way of putting it.
And to Tom's point about where does he reflect the transformatory ambition, that's question 2, where you'd be required to talk about the innovation going beyond state of the art, the questions around market awareness, scale, size of market, routes to market. I think those are areas where anyone can talk about the level of ambition, I think, in the project. And those are 3 areas where I think you have the ability to convey, what you'd really like to do with the project. Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Great, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So just a quick question. So you're mentioning about your own use of machine learning and machine learning techniques and AI. So you're holding an incredibly rich data set here from some amazing consortium partners. Do you deploy any kind of optimization on that data to say this is what the perfect consortium could look like? Or
no. Okay. We're using machine learning to check duplicate applications and to make sure that people aren't multiple submissions. When you've had, if you look at the data we have online, there's 30,000 projects there that we need to make sure that we aren't funding again.
Right.
So that's what we're using the machine learning, and that's what we're looking at rather than anything else.
I think it would be, never say never, but I guess I would expect it to be unlikely you would find a cookie cutter for a perfect consortia, right? Because the projects we fund from Innovate UK vary from very small digital only type applications through to large manufacturing, health and life science areas, farming, construction. The variety is massive. So I'd say it's unlikely we'd find that.
Thank you. There's a question at the back there. Sir.
Hi, this is Payman Mo from Harvey Milton. Due to the situation of our project, we are working based on real-time data. And then we need to go to some customers' projects as a pilot. Whilst we are working with the research center from UK, subcontractors from UK, all partners from UK. But the project, because it's an infrastructure project, we need to go to a real project to get the live data. It might be, for example, in North Sea, or somewhere outside UK. But can we incur cost of travel and developing when we are going to the projects outside UK?
Is that any different to the project costs that Barry outlined? Is there anything that you're not sure?
It's similar. For example, the travels, the hotels, but let me explain more. Our service work on infrastructure projects, oil and gas projects, to provide real-time data integration. So to develop the concept, we need to go to a real active project to make the pilot there. So the project might be we discuss with BP, but they have a project outside UK and we go there to collect the data. So can we add the costs of this to the project outside UK?
So the generic answer is if you can justify the travel costs within your project, then you can put them in, but you need to convince the assessors that those are justifiable travel costs that deliver the required impacts of the particular project proposal. I would also say we should probably talk about whether oil and gas service fits in accountancy, insurance, or legal services before you put an application in. Okay?
Because one part of this project is to provide assurance for the accountancy, auditing, and
we can
dispute.
discuss that
well, let's
one
take
to
that
one.
offline because let's not look at individual applications. Are there any other questions? Astrid at the back on, no one coming in on the web, right? Okay, there's one at the back.
Hi there. Simple question. If you're using project funds to use consultants, basically some technical consultants, does that count as a collaborative project? Or is a collaborative project only one in which there are multiple organizations in a consortium?
So that to me sounds more like you're subcontracting work to a consultant rather than them appearing in the finance summary table as a partner, and who would, if they're a consultant, they would then have to match fund.
Yes.
So that wouldn't, if they're coming in as a subcontract, it isn't a collaboration.
Collaborative. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. But are there any limitations on subcontracting? Are there amounts in a project that are allowable or not allowable?
So there aren't amounts, but everything needs to be justified and quantified and explained why.
Okay, all right, it's really clear. Thank you. I think if there are no further questions, then we'll bring this section of the day to a close. Just before you all go, this afternoon we have pitching sessions. Those of you who have already provided slides, that's great. Come and find myself or Anita over lunch. If you'd like to present your company in a 2-minute stand-up pitch, if you're looking for partners, again, come and find myself or Anita over lunch, and we'll try and squeeze you in this afternoon. I think we have at least 15 organisations presenting this afternoon, so I do hope that you can stay on. Just looking at the list of people who have registered today, we've got some amazing people from some amazing organisations in the room. So I do hope that over lunch, that you'll stay for lunch, but over lunch you speak to people that you haven't met before and that you make new friends and new consortia. We know for a fact that of the last, for example, the last 5G briefing competition back in November, we had 4 of the winning consortia in the room and 2 consortia were formed on the day. So it is worthwhile you meeting people over lunch and exchanging business cards and coming back this afternoon if you can possibly stay. If you arrived here late and you haven't registered, please, it's really important that you do register. And Anita at the back, my colleague, is happy to take your name.